All right, today I want to very quickly show you and basically just review a program, a little sample program that I wrote to allow you to write to and then read from a private file. This is needed if you want to tackle the extra credit in Unit 9. If you're not going that far, and you can just listen and absorb what you can. It's relatively simple, so it's not a bad extra credit maybe to tackle if you've got enough time. Speaking of enough time, let's talk about those emails real quick, see if you had any questions. I sent you a flurry of emails saying if you want an update to Unit 9, I got to have it by Sunday morning so that I can grade it Sunday. You've got 2 days then to submit it. All other assignments are due 11:59 p.m. All updates, everything is due Tuesday night at midnight. It's the last day of the semester. Don't know how quickly I'm going to be able to grade that stuff, but that's when everything is due. Anything comes in after that, you better be bringing bribes. Because I'm looking forward to having one job again instead of two. But anyways. So, questions about the updates to Unit 9? Anything that comes in after Sunday, 8 o'clock in the morning, final. I won't be offering you any updates to it. You can still turn stuff in, but you won't be offered any updates on anything that comes in after Sunday. The notes for Unit 9 have been updated slightly. What I'm in right now is the Unit 5 notes because that's where I put the private file stuff, because really that's what it's about, reading text from files. So I put most of the information that we need about reading and writing private files into Unit 5. Unit 9 notes have been updated slightly just to show you how to use the pull parser that we learned about last time on a string instead of on a file. So if you have this big, huge monster string with 500,000 characters in it, you can still read that using pull parser. You just have to tell it, and there's 2 or 3 lines added to Chapter 9 notes Unit 9 notes to tell you how to do that. The other thing I updated was the assignment. For Unit 9, it now includes the extra credit. So here's the extra credit. Basically, modify your Unit 9 program to read the XML and write the XML to a private file. That way, when you change your Christmas list or your birthday list, the changes will be saved, and the next time you run the program, even if your program is removed from memory, it will be able to recover that data. Now, Sherry's question over the weekend was, where do I add stuff here? That's for you to add after the class is over. Because you're right, that's a piece that's missing, right? How do I add a new person when Sherry's next grandbaby comes along? How does she add that grandbaby to the database? Right now, there's no way to do it. So how do you do that? Well, I would suggest a menu or a button or something. And what if she gets ticked off at one of her in-laws and wants to take them off the birthday list? There's no way to delete right now either. Again, that one is a little easier to add because you can probably use the edit button that's already built in to allow you to delete and add rows from a list. But yeah, those features, I'm not asking you to do them. What if she wants them sorted by name instead of by date? Maybe a sort feature would be, and there's all kinds of cool things you can do here. Just keep adding them, but it's not required for the program. But it would be nice to be able to prove, and again, it's extra credit, but it would be nice to be able to prove that you can persistently store this data. So that's out there if you're interested. I have not sent you an updated version of the evaluation sheet because that kind of spoils all the fun of extra credit. So I'm going to start with Unit 5. And as I said, I've modified it to allow it or to include this stuff. Android, as we discovered last week when I was trying to figure out how to do this, does not allow you to change the contents of its resource files. So in our mind, they're basically constant. We can't change them. We can't change the toy icon that I have in my program to a different one. I can add other icons and swap them around, but I can't actually change the icon that's stored in the resources as my program is running. If you want to permanently save some data, and typically this is text, though this correlates very closely with databases. If you want to permanently save some data, you need to put it in a private file. There are also public files. I'm not going to take the time to talk about those here. I did notice this morning as I was uploading stuff that on my website There's this old set of notes about dialog views and private files. Forgot it was there, so I rebuilt all this good stuff. There's probably good stuff in there. You might be able to find something in there about how to access public files, but I'm going to be focusing on the focusing on the private files because they're relatively simple. The only risk here is if they're huge. And what's huge today? A megabyte? Nah. 10 megabytes? 20? I remember way back when I used to teach Intro to Computer Science or something like that. I forget what it was called. We talked about what's a megabyte, what's a gigabyte, etc. And the analogy I used to give to my students is that a megabyte has the same number of characters in it, about 1 million, right, as a 400-page novel. How many of your birthday lists would fill a 400-page novel? How many items would you have to have in there to fill a 400-page novel? I'm not worried. That's 1 megabyte. Did I say gigabytes? I hope I said megabytes, because megabyte is one 400-page novel. And so birthday lists and Christmas lists, you're not even going to get close to a megabyte, I'm sure. Even if you kept it for years and years and years, you still wouldn't get close to a megabyte. So I think local files should be able to handle a megabyte. They're private, which means that other applications can't share this data. So if you got birthdays in there, then you write another application that needs access to your birthday list. Then you're going to have to take a look at the shared files so that you can share that information. But most of these files are private, meaning only your app can access them. And if somebody uninstalls your app, the files go with it. So if they uninstall your app because they want the new version or they want to try somebody else's and then they decide they want to put it back in again, your Christmas list is going back to the default, whatever it was. And so that can be an issue, something to keep in the back of your mind. So if I want to write data to a private file, really no big deal. We're going to create this file output stream object, and then we're going to open a file for private. Is there a public one there? I don't know. I didn't look. This worked. I was so happy I got it to work, and it wasn't even midnight yet that I said good enough. So this will open a file. If the file doesn't exist, it will create it. Just like what we learned in most file systems. If you ask to open a file, it's not there, it gets created. It gets created in a special folder. I'll show you that as we go along here. And then all we have to do is write to that stream. And we can write whatever we want. Typically it's strings, must be strings. And notice that the string data is converted to bytes. Think of these as executable files in Windows. They're just a bunch of ones and zeros. They're not characters, they're not strings, they're not treated that way. When we write to a private file, we're writing a bunch of bytes. Get bytes changes whatever's in this string to a bunch of bytes, puts them into that file. Very, very quick. If you wish, you can write many times as you want to. I'll show you that in the sample code here in just a second. And then as always, when you open a file, you should close it. If you don't, there's a possibility that your program will not be able to read later or even write to it later because the file is still open. So here's my sample program that just has a hello world to start with and then a read file button. When you read the file button, it goes out to this private file and brings the data back in again. Well, how did it get out there? Well, that's a good question. In my case, I've written a write routine to write out some sample data, whatever I want it to be. And I'm going to run that first. So I'm going to run this program twice. First, to create the initial copy of that file with stuff in it, because just like Sherry's program, I'm missing an add button. I can't add text to this file. So I'm going to create the file as my program launches. And then I'm going to comment that line out because that should create the file. And then run the program again, see if I can read it back in again. That's my goal here. So this is very simple layout, nothing fancy there. So I want to show it to you. And inside here, this is very simple. I was talking with Sherry this weekend. She said, "You didn't show me how to do that." No. I don't show you how to do everything. I give you tools, and then you got to figure out how to use them. All right, so here's a tool for writing to a file. Are you writing to a regular old text file? Kinda, but yours is going to have XML in it. So what do you got to modify here to make it an XML file? Not a whole lot. So I've created a couple of strings, one that has my name with carriage returns and mid-state tech and Stevens Point, and then another one which is a mission. The main reason I'm doing this is simply to show you that you can write as many times as you need to before you close the file. In this case, instead of stream, I've called it FOS for file output stream, initialize it to nothing, and I use this file name. I created kind of a constant, a global file name for it. That's my file name, and you can put anything in here you want. Unlike Windows, the extensions don't mean anything. I think they have to be, no, I don't know, I'm even sure they need to be lowercase. I didn't try it. Let's be brave. Hopefully I won't get this toast saying it was a write error. And okay, so this is my write to file. I open it, private mode, put out a bunch of bytes. Notice you can even put a string literal here. That's a carriage return. And dot get bytes that. So turn this into whatever it is, a 13 or a 10 or something like that. And then display the mission, close the file. So in my main program, I link the widgets just so I can talk to them, and then write to that file. And that's all it does right now. So I'm going to run it and pause the recording so I have to sit here and watch the emulator come up. All right, so here's my program, and it's running. And I didn't get any toast message saying that creating this file failed or any of this writing stuff failed, but it's not doing anything. But it didn't crash. And in this case, what I did is open and wrote to and closed the file. Well, how do I know if that worked? And this may also cause another recording pause here. But if you want to know if that worked, there is a tool built into Android Studio that allows us to check that out. I don't think these buttons do it. Nope. AVD Manager. Nope, that's the, nope. SDK Manager. Oh, there it is. My notes don't talk about that one. My notes say go to Tools, Android Device Monitor. So it was on the toolbar. So this little guy on the end here allows us to look inside a device or an emulator. And yes, this is in my Unit 5 notes now. All right, so this is what happens once the Android device monitor loads itself into memory. You should see all your devices here. In most cases, you've got one. At home, I had a couple, so I had to pick the right one. And then what we want access to is a file explorer. Every device like this, like any other computer, has a bunch of files in it. And we now want to explore that to see if my private file got created. Again, all of this is in my notes. What we want to dig into is the data folder, which has another data folder in it. Don't ask me why. Why is it data? Well, there's all these other kinds of data. This is pure data, I guess. And inside there, you see it. What you see there is a bunch of project names. Remember with the com dot whatever, but they're all cut off, so I need to make this a little bigger. And then I want to look for my project. How do you know? You should know the name of your project. Notice these are all the programs that are built in. So I'm probably looking. There's my Voker. That's the one I use. Hopefully you're using something that you'll recognize. And looks like I got a lot of applications running with my name on them here. So now I got to remember which one this is. I think it's just my application, 1207. So this is when I was planning to just have it be a test to make sure this all worked, and it turned into the actual live project for here in class, and so now it's got a really lame name. Usually I'd give it a little better name. But a lot of you have been building Unit 7, then 8, and then 9. Remember, when you look it up here, it's probably going to have that Unit 7 name in it unless you changed it for some reason. So here it is. I can dig inside of there, and inside there is a files folder. And there's my private file with a capital P, no problem. What the device monitor does not allow you to do is double click on this and open it up, because it's actually stored on an emulator and it's just not going to do it. If you want to look inside here, what you first have to do is download it off of the device, and that's what that button is. That first button there, and yes, that's listed in the notes. Download it off the device and put it somewhere. Just select the file first. And I'm going to try putting it on the desktop. And I'll just leave the name the same, though you could change it. And it just showed up on my off the screen in the desktop. So let me move this stuff out of the way so we can see it. And now here I can use Windows, or in this case the Finder, to look inside that and see what's going on. I did add one thing to my notes, is if you're in Windows and you use Notepad to open up that text file, which is what it opens in automatically, this will go across the screen, and the \n's aren't enough for Notepad. It's like it wants a \n/r. Remember when we were doing that many years ago? I didn't try it to see if it worked. I just said, forget it, I'm not opening it in Notepad. I opened it in WordPad or Word, and then it looks like this. And so this stuff was written to that file, and I assure you I have not been on this emulator here testing this program. So the only way that file was created because I just ran the program. So that all seems to be working. So now I've written to that file. How do I read it? And again, notice how straightforward this is. Open the file for private mode, and it means when it's in private mode, it's automatically going to put it in that data project files folder automatically. If you want it in a separate folder, I don't think you can tell private files where to go. It belongs to your project. It's already in a private location. So that's pretty straightforward. Reading is not a whole lot worse, not a whole lot different than what we've seen. Again, create a stream pointer, this time for an input stream. I'm going to read from it. Open it, but you don't have to designate the mode. If it's a private file that you're trying to access from somebody else, you won't even be able to get to it because it's not inside your project folder. Why would I have to put in here that it's in somebody else's project folder? You can't. Right, so all you have to do is put your file name here. So whatever you called it up here, and you can call it whatever you want. Make sure you use the same name here, which means I better go fix my reading program, right? Because I just put a capital P on my private, and I bet you it doesn't work. Then we're going to use our trusty dusty string builder. And we're going to define a character. We're going to read a character and put it into CH, and as long as this is going to be a byte, because remember we wrote a bunch of bytes. When we hit the end of file, we get a -1. So this basically says read a character until you hit the end of file, but when you read it, put it in the variable CH. We saw something similar to this when we were reading before, strings. Take that character that I just read, actually turn it into a character, and append it to my string builder. And so this just takes one character at a time. When we were reading from a file before, we were reading entire lines of text at a time. Now we're reading one character at a time, and this is extremely fast because we're reading them as bytes. It's not even characters, so there's no translation that needs to be done. It's extremely fast. We read them one character at a time, append them. The \n is also a character. It gets appended. We start new lines. And when we're done, we're going to have an SB that's got all the characters that we found inside that file. Remember that the string class in most languages today holds at least 1 billion, more often than not 2 billion characters, which is roughly 5 novels. In one string, that's still an awful lot of stuff. We were laughing at the fact, trying to make birthday lists that we're going to fill one novel. A string can hold a ton of stuff in memory. So the key here is the SB file, that's just my pointer, my name, contains all of that text. Still got to close it. There's a try-catch wrapped around it so that if it breaks, we can catch it. The one thing I'm not doing here is checking to see if the file exists. What if your app doesn't have a file? Now, I just made sure that mine does. I created my Vocrgall MSTC And our mission file, I made sure it's there. Well, what if there isn't there? Well, I don't have code for that here. If you want to, there's easy to find code that says if the file exists, basically. It's something like if string.file exists. It's not hard. I just didn't put it in here to keep things simple today. So if you're sure the file is going to be there, then you're okay. But if you want to check, you can throw an if statement in front of this and say, if the file exists, then go ahead and open it. Otherwise, don't. Or throw an exception. Or create a new one. Very common for programs to create sample data for you. So if it was a birthday program, it automatically puts the author's name and birth name in there, their mother's name and birth date in there, and stops. So you've got something to go from, so when you first bring up the list, it's not empty. And then you can add and remove and do whatever you want to. So that's very common. Keep reading until you hit the end of file. We already talked about viewing the contents of a private file. This is the hard way. There is an icon. Click that guy and go find it. Or this will pull it out so you can look inside it. So here's the data, your project files path, in case you forget all that complicated stuff. This technique, by the way, came in very handy when we were learning how to use databases, because we would create a database and we would do it wrong. How do you get rid of a bad database? Use the same technique. You go digging into the File Explorer, find it, and that File Explorer, the Android device monitor, does allow you to delete files. There's a minus here that lets you delete files. So you can delete files off your device. Kevin's eyebrows just went up. Yeah, that's kind of dangerous. Unless you want to start over completely, then it's not bad as long as it's your file. All right, so let's see the read code and then put it to work, and then we'll be pretty much done here. So now that I've written to the file, I don't want my program to write to it every time I launch my program. I want that was a one-time bad deal. Okay, so now when I comment that out, that file should still be there. When I rewrite the program, it will still fire that file when I rebuild the program. So here's the read routine. Again, nothing too fancy, just a toast to make sure the button was clicked. I probably should remove that. Create the file, the input file, the builder, keep reading until we hit the end of file, append it, close it, and then what I did, just for test purposes, is simply change the hello world to whatever's in my string. There's my SB, converted to a string. Remember, this is a string builder if you want the string itself. To string it, and then throw that in the text view. What I should see on my screen after I run this again is the contents of my file, the Vokergall, midstate, center point drive. So first thing I'm going to do, I have to do it offline here because the recording doesn't let me do it, is I'm going to go back to the main screen, please. Okay. And I'm going to go into the settings. Oh, it ran it, and it brought it in. Did I actually didn't click that button somehow? Okay, well, it looks like it brought it in. No, what is that? That's an old program. That's not the text that I put in there. I must have accidentally clicked the program. Okay, let's try that again. Click, click. All right, so here's the settings. I'm going to go to the apps, and I'm going to find that program, which I believe in here is called print private file test. There it is. Click. And now if I want to, I can force this program to stop. Remember, in general, your program stays in a device's memory until you run so many apps that yours is the one that gets kicked out. But if I'm testing, how does it behave when it stops? I can force it to stop. May misbehave. Well, not if the programmer wrote it right. So now whatever was in there before, I've stopped it. I need to change. Nope, the file name I don't need to change because I used a constant. That was smart. Run it. And hopefully the new one will come up. All right, now I commented out the line that says write the file. Okay. So it's not going to write the file this time when I run the program, but hopefully the file is still there, so when I read it, it all comes in, and that is what's out there. So this seems to work. In my mind, it's not terribly complicated. Reading and writing files isn't complicated. Now you're going to be trying to read and write XML files. That might be a little different. But the techniques are the same. And now I could do this. I'm going to go stop that app again. So I'm doing this again. And now that app is stopped. But I'm not going to reload it. I'm just going to relaunch it right here from the phone. And the file's still there. So it works the way we expect. One more test. Again, I'm going back into the settings. But this time I'm going to uninstall it. Now this I haven't tested, so I'm out on a limb. I'm going to uninstall it, and according to everything I've read, that not only uninstalls the app, but deletes the file. But remember where that file was? It was inside data, my project name, and it was called my application, shouldn't even be there anymore. Uninstalled. And so if it uninstalls the application, I don't know if there's a refresh here, if I even need a refresh here. It was Voker My Application, still there, but now it's dated 11/9. So that's a second one. I don't think that's the same one. I think that's the right one. Go inside there, and there isn't even a files folder there. So because that file is stored inside your project folder, which is what these are, because it's stored inside there, there's no way that when you remove that folder that the file that's inside there could stay with it. Questions? Then I'm very quickly going to bounce to the Unit 9 notes. And at the bottom of the pull parser, so I'm going to go to document class just so I can move up and find it quicker. The bottom of the pull parser, I added a little bit of notes to talk about parsing XML that's stored in a string. So instead of creating a pull parser and doing all the stuff we did before, we define one as a new pull parser. Notice the syntax threw me for a loop. There's no new in front here. And then set its input to a string reader with your string here. So if you're reading 5,000 characters out of a text file, put that string in here, and this string reader will read them, and then you process the same way you did the other XML with the for loop and the switch statement. I did update these yesterday. With the while loop, while you don't hit the end of the document. You're still using the XPP variable, but instead of getting it out of a document, you're getting it out of a string, and it still hopefully has all the tags in it and everything works fine. So with those little snippets of information, if you've got time, you should be able to handle the extra credit in Unit 9. Probably this Sunday, I'm going to go into Blackboard, and any assignment that's not been submitted yet, I'm going to turn it into a 0. Because some of you right now are getting a little bit of a maybe overconfident that I'm doing okay. I still got a B- in this class. Yeah, but that's because all the missing grades are not being counted right now. When I put them all to zeros, your grade may be slightly affected. I'm also going to put zeros in the Unit 9 grade so that those of you who may have better things to do may look at your grade and say, I got an A minus, I haven't even started Unit 9 yet. Forget it. Not a great plan, but an option. Most of the time, one score, particularly in this class where most of the scores were in the 20s, one will be enough to take you down a half a letter grade. So what else do I need to talk about? Nothing. Okay.